The year was 1993. The place, Vista Del Mar, a sun-baked border town where the scent of salt mixed uneasily with the exhaust fumes of heavy transport. Vista Del Mar was a town of dualities. On one side, simple farming communities and retirees seeking the quiet life. On the other, it was a crucial waypoint for the operations of the Solteros cartel, a fact everybody knew but nobody dared to speak. In the midst of this volatile mix were two friends, Ben Carter, a former Army Reserve pilot running a struggling crop-dusting business, and Eli Vargas, a quiet, methodical accountant who, crucially, had found work managing the books for a cartel front company, Desert Logistics. Ben needed money for his ailing mother. Eli needed an escape from a life of moral compromises. Both were trapped, watching the cartel's casual brutality from too close a distance. The plan, hatched over stale coffee and late-night sessions in Ben's dusty hangar, was audacious, bordering on insane. Eli knew the cartel's security protocols for their regional vault, a reinforced safe house disguised as a defunct olive oil refinery 4 miles outside town. He had the codes. Ben had the escape vehicle, a Vietnam-era utility helicopter, a Bell OH-58 Kiowa, relicensed as a private transport, its engine lovingly rebuilt. The target was not the cartel's cash flow but a specific shipment of bearer bonds and high-value uncut diamonds, scheduled for transit on the 14th of September. Eli had seen the ledgers. The numbers were staggering. "Enough to vanish forever, Ben," he'd whispered, his face tight with a fear colder than the night air. "Or enough to buy us a permanent room in the ground." The night was moonless, the air thick with humidity. The Kiowa's rotor blades cut the silence with a deep, chopping rhythm as Ben held it in a low hover over the refinery. Inside, Eli, using a temporary access code and the sheer audacity of a man who knew he was already dead if he failed, had subdued the skeleton crew. The vault was open. The whole operation took just under 7 minutes. Eli emerged, carrying 2 heavy, military-grade duffel bags, his movements frantic but precise. He scrambled into the helicopter. Ben pitched the Kiowa into a rapid ascent, pulling sharply north, away from the established cartel routes, toward the remote, sparsely populated foothills. The smell of burnt aviation fuel and adrenaline was overpowering in the cramped cabin. Eli didn't speak, only gripped the bags, his knuckles white against the heavy canvas. The town below, Vista Del Mar, was a scattering of lights, blissfully unaware of the seismic theft that had just occurred. The escape was too clean, too fast. For 30 minutes, they were airborne ghosts. Then, Ben saw the warning light flash red on the console. Oil pressure. A catastrophic failure. Perhaps sabotage. Perhaps a simple mechanical ghost from the old chopper's past, accelerated by the extreme stress. Archive. Transcript partial audio from Control Tower Intercept. September 14, 1993, 1:51 a.m. Tower. Unidentified aircraft, you are off course. Identify yourself. Pilot, Ben Carter, static, followed by a strained voice. Mayday, mayday! Losing power, main rotor, going down. Repeat, going down? Near the... Break in audio, Old Man's Mesa. Tower. Say again, pilot. Location? Silence. Ben wrestled with the controls, the chopper bucking violently. He saw a clearing, a small farmstead, rushing up fast. He had a split second to choose the lesser evil. He cut the engine, hoping to glide. The impact was violent, a deafening crunch of metal and earth, the tail rotor shearing off against a large oak tree. They hit hard, but the cabin miraculously held. Both men were stunned, bruised, but alive. The 2 duffel bags, however, had been thrown clear into the dark undergrowth. The crash site was just over 100 yards from the small, isolated farm of the Ramirez family. Elias Ramirez, a lean man of 55, a second-generation sheep farmer, and his wife, Clara, were woken instantly. Elias grabbed the antique shotgun he kept above the mantel and crept to the window. He saw the wreckage, a mangled metal bird, half hidden by shadow, smoke curling upwards. Moments later, he saw two figures stumble out of the wreckage, one limping badly, Ben, the other frantically searching the ground, Eli. The two cartel thieves were disoriented, bleeding, and armed. They stumbled towards the farm, not for sanctuary, but for water and a moment to regroup. Elias met them at the porch, the shotgun firm in his hands. "Go back," Elias said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Leave. This is my land." Ben, seeing the desperate look in Elias's eyes, and knowing the fire would soon draw unwanted attention, made the critical choice. "We don't want trouble," he rasped, gesturing at the wreckage. "Just water. And tell no one. We'll be gone by first light." Psychological depth. The scene was less a confrontation and more a silent agreement forged in mutual fear. The farmers feared the strangers. The strangers feared the organization that would soon come looking. Eli, focused only on the missing bags, was already staggering back into the trees, following his memory of where the vault's contents had landed. The next morning, the sun revealed the devastation. The helicopter was a wreck, but the farm and the Ramirez family were untouched. Ben and Eli were gone. What was not gone was the Solteros cartel. By 9 a.m., two black, unmarked SUVs arrived, not police, but men in cheap suits and dark glasses. They moved with an unsettling, precise speed. The leader, a man later identified only as El Gallo, in intelligence reports, approached Elias. "A mechanical failure," El Gallo said, his voice a low, gravelly threat. "We are retrieving our property. Did you see anything unusual, Senor Ramirez?" Elias, looking into eyes devoid of pity, remembered the desperate faces of the two men, the fear in his wife's face, and the immense power of the cartel. He had two young daughters inside the farmhouse. "No, senor," Elias replied, his body language communicating only subservience and fatigue. "Smoke. Crash. But the men, they ran into the darkness. I saw nothing of value." Subscribe now, so you don't miss the next videos. The cartel men were thorough but sloppy, focused on the chopper's remains and any immediate traces. They assumed the thieves had run on foot into the desert, perhaps dying of exposure. They loaded the wreckage, leaving only scorched earth and a tense, palpable silence. The official police report, issued 4 hours later, classified the incident as a fatal helicopter crash involving two unidentified persons, with the remains later recovered by private contractors. Cause: mechanical failure. Case closed. No mention of the theft. No mention of the farmers. Detective Frank Merrill, a veteran of the Vista Del Mar Police Department, was tired. He was methodical, but the cartel's reach, the constant pressure from upstairs to not see certain things, had worn him down to a stoic acceptance. The helicopter case felt wrong from the start. Too fast, too clean, too many black SUVs. "They said they found two bodies, Sarge," reported Detective Lena Rodriguez, a sharp, young officer recently transferred from the city, whose enthusiasm had not yet been extinguished by Vista Del Mar's apathy. "But no ID, no dental records, nothing. Just incinerated remains in the wreckage. The files are sealed." Merrill only grunted, tracing a line on the cover of the filed report. "When the cartel cleans up, they clean up, Lena. We look the other way. That's the local policy." Yet, Merrill held one single, unverified piece of evidence. A call he intercepted on a civilian band radio, recorded just hours after the crash. Archive. Transcript Detective Merrill's personal recording, September 14, 1993, 11:30 a.m. Voice 1, muffled, Cartel. The money is gone. They took the payload. Voice 2, El Gallo, cold. The things are gone, not the men. Find the place. Find the family. If they talk, they pay for the lot. Voice 1. But the crash site. Voice 2. They did not die in the fire. They ran. Search the perimeter. We need to know who saw them. Merrill didn't act on the recording. He couldn't. He knew exposing it would mean a death sentence for the family who lived nearest the crash site, the Ramirezes. He simply filed the recording in a separate, unmarked envelope in his home safe, a ghost file for a ghost crime. 9 years passed. The cartel's operation in Vista Del Mar continued. The two missing men, Ben Carter and Eli Vargas, became nothing more than a local urban legend, the ghost copter thieves. Detective Merrill retired, taking his conscience and the tape with him. Lena Rodriguez took his place, still meticulous, but now infused with Merrill's cautious cynicism. In 2002, Lena was cleaning out a police evidence locker slated for destruction, a tedious, mandated task. In a dusty box labeled, Miscellaneous Cartel Debris 1993, she found a heavy-duty, reinforced black boot, not a military boot, but one worn by heavy equipment operators. It had been collected from the crash site, listed as unrelated civilian property. She almost tagged it for disposal, but the sole was unusual. It was worn down only on the outer edge, indicative of a severe, chronic limp. Then, she noticed a small, almost microscopic tear in the synthetic fabric near the ankle. Peeking from the tear, she found it, a small, faded slip of thermal paper, neatly folded. Lena pulled the slip out with tweezers. It was a receipt, a gas station receipt from a Vista Del Mar, Texaco, dated September 13, 1993, for $42 in premium unleaded and a packet of chewing tobacco. The name of the customer, scrawled on the credit card line, was barely legible, B. Carter. The name didn't ring a bell initially. It was only when she cross-referenced the 1993 police incident reports, looking for anyone named Carter involved in the ghost copter case, that she found the connection. Ben Carter, the missing crop-dusting pilot. The officially incinerated thief. The official record claimed 2 men died in a fireball. This small, mundane piece of thermal paper, preserved in the sole of a boot, proved at least one of them had been alive, walking, and limping heavily after the crash. If Ben Carter survived, where did he go, and what, or who, had made him vanish for 9 years? And what did the Ramirez family, still quietly farming near the crash site, truly know? If you want to know what Detective Rodriguez found next, and the devastating truth hidden by the cartel, subscribe and write which city you are watching from, and we'll move on. The gas station receipt, a faded slip of thermal paper marked with B. Carter, was Detective Lena Rodriguez's personal ghost. Officially, the ghost copter case of 1993 remained closed, filed under accidental fatalities. But the receipt proved Ben Carter was alive after the crash. And if he was alive, he didn't die in the fire. He vanished. Rodriguez, now a seasoned detective sergeant, used her accumulated vacation time, not department resources, to pursue this cold case. She was methodical, driven by the lingering unease that defined her years under Merrill. She knew she couldn't challenge the cartel's narrative openly, but she could follow the paper trail. Her first step was finding the only known witness, Elias Ramirez. She drove the winding, dusty road out to the old man's mesa, the air drier and thinner than in town. The Ramirez farm was quiet, the same battered truck sitting next to a weathered, gray farmhouse. The crash site was a circular patch of stunted, blackened growth, a constant scar on the landscape. Elias Ramirez, older now, his face a map of sun-etched worry, met her on his porch. He didn't invite her in. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Elias acknowledged, his voice dry. "I told the cartel men everything I knew 9 years ago." Lena didn't mention the receipt or Ben Carter's name. She spoke only of the silence. "The official record says 2 men died, Mr. Ramirez. But the men who came here, they weren't police. They didn't care about the accident. They cared about what was taken." Subscribe now so you don't miss the next videos. Elias looked past her, towards the scar in the field. He paused for a long, heavy moment. "You have children, Sergeant?" he asked, his tone flat. "A son," Lena replied, bracing herself. "When men like that look at you, they don't see a witness. They see leverage. They took the wreckage. They cleaned the site. They made it clear what happens if you have a memory." He finally relented, his words tumbling out fast, hushed. 2 men. Not bodies. They were hurt. One with a bad limp. They ran north, toward the canyon. They spoke of bags. 2 canvas bags. This was the first official confirmation. The men survived, and the stolen property, the bearer bonds and diamonds, was not at the crash site. Elias's admission was a crack in the cartel's impenetrable wall of silence. His fear, however, was the real story. He wasn't protecting the thieves. He was protecting his family. Lena returned to the station, retrieved a copy of the original 1993 file, and finally, she visited the retired Frank Merrill. The old detective, now living quietly on the outskirts of town, produced his ghost tape. The intercepted cartel audio. Archive, transcript Detective Merrill's personal recording, repeat and confirmation, voice 2, El Gallo, cold. The things are gone, not the men. Find the place. Find the family. If they talk, they pay for the lot. They knew the men survived, Lena. Merrill sighed, tapping the old cassette case. They didn't want the bodies. They wanted the payload. They closed the case to stop us from looking for the bags. Lena connected her findings. The receipt confirmed Ben Carter. Elias confirmed 2 men survived, one with a limp. The cartel tape confirmed the theft was successful. Lena then did what no one had done in 9 years. She thoroughly investigated the second man, Elias Vargas, the accountant. Eli Vargas wasn't reported missing. His file simply showed he left his cartel-linked job and relocated to South America in late 1993. A neat, tidy exit. But Lena found one inconsistency in his official records: a forgotten safety deposit box at a regional bank, maintained by a yearly automatic debit. Archive, Bank Protocol Safety Deposit Box Access Logged, Excerpt, Box Holder, Elias Vargas, Inactive, Box Access, September 14, 1993, 10:27 a.m. Signed, E. Vargas. 10:27 a.m. Lena muttered, running the numbers. Hours after the crash. They were supposed to be dead, incinerated. Eli Vargas was in town hours after the crash. He hadn't run immediately. He'd been cleaning up. But the cartel's things were still missing. If Eli was in town, why did he leave the receipt in the limping Ben Carter's boot at the crash site? Was it a clue? A desperate act? Lena and Merrill surmised the men had to have hidden the bags immediately after the crash, before they split up. The limp was a key. Ben was injured, perhaps incapable of carrying his share far. The only place north of the farm and south of the difficult canyon trails was a cluster of remote, abandoned mining shacks, a forgotten stretch of land called Las Siete Minas. They drove out at dawn, Lena armed with shovels and Merrill with his old-school intuition. The area smelled of rust and dry sagebrush. They found the ruins of a small, wooden hut, the roof long gone. The ground was hard, compacted desert clay. They spent hours digging, the sound of the metal shovels against the earth echoing in the stillness. Lena's hands were blistered, her fatigue mounting when Merrill stopped. "Wait, Lena. Not just digging. Look for the disturbance." He pointed to a slightly raised, perfectly rectangular patch of earth near the shack's dilapidated foundation. Under a thin layer of soil, they found a smooth slab of slate, a marker. Underneath the slate, the earth was looser. They unearthed a corroded, heavy metal box, a military ammunition crate. Merrill used a crowbar. The lock snapped. Inside, resting on a bed of dry desert sand, were 2 canvas duffel bags. They were brittle with age, but intact. They had found the things. Lena opened the first bag. Inside, rows upon rows of high-value bearer bonds, millions, possibly tens of millions of dollars. But the second bag was different. It didn't contain diamonds. It contained only 5 items. A worn leather-bound address book. A small, black and white photograph of 2 smiling men, Ben and Eli. A thick, sealed manila envelope labeled Ramirez Family. A rusty, disassembled Bell OH-58 Kiowa main bearing, the part that failed in the crash. A microcassette tape. The cash was a lead, but the contents of the second bag were the story. The thieves had taken the cartel's money, but had left behind their final testament. Lena sat in her car, the desert sun blazing, and played the microcassette tape in a battery-powered dictaphone. Archive, audio cassette voice of Eli Vargas, recorded September 14, 1993, approximately 3 a.m. Eli Vargas, voice weak strained. "It was always Ben's idea to run, but my idea to take the ledger. They knew the money was missing, but they don't know I copied the proof. The bearing." A cough, a gasp. The failure wasn't accidental. It was installed. El Gallo made sure it was faulty before the flight. He was protecting his own internal theft, trying to frame us for his embezzlement. Eli Vargas, cont. "I told Ben to run with a limp. Take the money, take his chance. I'm going back to the town. To the bank. I have to make a choice. If I disappear, they think the money's gone with me. If I reappear, they use me to find Ben. I can't let that happen. The envelope is for the family. If the money is ever found, they deserve a share. Tell them we saw their silence. It bought us time. I went back to make noise. To be visible, then silent forever." The tape revealed the truth. The crash was not an accident. It was an internal assassination attempt orchestrated by El Gallo, aiming to steal the cash from the cartel itself and blame the 2 small-time thieves. Eli Vargas, the accountant, sacrificed his freedom by going back to Vista Del Mar, creating a false trail of relocation to ensure the cartel stopped searching for the money and, critically, stopped searching the remote area where Ben and the loot were hidden. The main bearing was proof of sabotage. The Ramirez envelope was a debt of gratitude. Lena opened the thick manila envelope addressed to the Ramirez family. Inside was not cash, but a meticulously notarized document, a trust deed assigning a significant portion of the bearer bonds, $5 million, to a fund for the Ramirez daughter's education. Attached was a note, scribbled in Eli's neat handwriting. Archive, note Elias Vargas. "For your silence, for your daughters. Buy the land they'll never take." The cartel was fooled. They chased the visible, traceable man, Eli Vargas, believing he had the money and had simply fled. They eliminated the threat by quietly disappearing. Eli, confident the case was closed and the money was beyond recovery. They never searched the crash site perimeter thoroughly because they believed the crash was simply a cover for Eli's planned disappearance with the loot. But Ben Carter? He was never found. Lena and Merrill concluded Ben, severely injured, took the largest portion of the money, vanished into the canyon, and successfully escaped the country, using his pilot skills and resources. The limp explained his inability to carry more than his share. He left the evidence, the receipt, the boot, the money, to ensure that if anyone ever found the cash, the truth about the sabotage and Eli's final, selfless act would be revealed. Lena couldn't use the bearer bonds or the tape in a public court. Exposing the cartel's internal theft would lead to bloodshed, not justice. She and Merrill decided on a different form of justice. Merrill, using old contacts and careful maneuvering, anonymously leaked the copied ledger pages, the documents Eli had mentioned, to a powerful, rival organization who had a score to settle with El Gallo. The outcome wasn't a conviction in a courtroom, but a necessary, chilling consequence. Within 6 months, cartel records in Vista Del Mar showed that El Gallo had retired, effective immediately. The silent, cold justice of the criminal underworld had been served. El Gallo's internal betrayal was exposed to his own masters, proving Eli's final sacrifice had not been in vain. Lena ensured the Ramirez trust deed, now the only clean, traceable evidence, was legally filed, masked by layers of shell companies to protect the family from retribution. Elias Ramirez, years later, finally understood the full weight of the secret he had kept. The 2 men he sheltered for a few desperate hours had not only repaid his silence, but had inadvertently saved his family from the cartel's continued presence by ending El Gallo's reign. Vista Del Mar slowly changed. The cartel's influence waned as El Gallo's corruption was exposed from within, forcing a structural change in leadership. The Ramirez farm, now financially secure, continued to operate, a quiet monument to a forgotten crime. The daughters went to college, funded by the trust established by a dead man they never knew. Detective Rodriguez learned that sometimes justice isn't about the law's victory, but about the victim's survival. The truth in this case was not in the official files, but in the forgotten archives, a faded receipt, a whispered confession on an old tape, and the moral strength of an accountant who chose the truth over escape. Imagine the weight of that choice, to run to safety or walk back into danger for a greater good. What do you think? Was Eli Vargas's sacrifice a true act of heroism? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to our channel, it always motivates us to make even better videos.